It's now my pleasure to introduce Alain Rabot. And Alain is the principal at Intersol Group. And Alain is going to present the CFA's strategy plan, our 5-year strat plan. The plan, which was recently approved by the CFA Board of Directors, is available in your virtual handbooks, your workbooks. And this is the culmination of a process that began last July involving engagement with CFA directors, members, member presidents, and general managers, as well as external stakeholders to ensure we heard from a diversity of voices reworking our strategic plan to see us through the next 5 years. I'll pass the floor to Alain now, but will just convey how pleased I was to see the final board engagement. It was incredible, the amount of engagement on this, and it came to such a point of clarity and great consensus around the future strategic priorities for our organization. Alain's going to run us through it, and thank you from the CFA board for all of your work on this.
Hello everyone, I'm really pleased to be with you this afternoon, and I'm going to start in French and then I'll switch over to English a little bit later on. So for those who need the headsets, I'll just give you a minute to put them on. My goal this afternoon, as Mary just explained, is to give you a bit of an overview about the strategic planning efforts that were deployed over the past 6 to 8 months. The last plan was from 2017 to 2022, and that was a 5-year plan, and in the summer of 2022 there was a call for submissions to support the Board of Directors in developing a new strategy, and Intersol was fortunate enough to win this proposal, this contract. And so I worked with the Board of Directors, I worked with the staff at the CFA, and with my colleague who isn't here this afternoon, we together worked on this strategic plan.
Technical console to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Alors, l'approche qu'on a proposée.
So the approach that we proposed, and it was part of our proposal, it was an approach where, as Mary just pointed out, we sought to have a fairly deep engagement with the members of the board, as well as the executive directors for all of the member organizations, and along with a few key stakeholders within the industry who we had identified as leaders within the industry. And with them we had an overview of the context, and that was done in September, October. And at the end of October, we were in a position where we could have a first workshop with the board during one of the board's meetings in the morning, and that was to have a look at the key issues that had come out of this environmental scan. Now, the environmental scan in October put forward all sorts of key issues, and we let them sit with the board in order to have a think through on these issues in order to prepare for the second workshop, which was a little bit more intensive, and it was for 2 days with the Board of Directors, and it was held in January of this year.
Issues that came out, those key strategic issues that came out from the environmental scan in October were, and I'm not going to, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but a couple of elements that have come out very clearly. You've heard it already many times, the evolving public perception on agriculture. There are many voices, and it's becoming a crowded space, and some of those voices are perhaps misrepresenting some facts. Let's put that diplomatically. The need to have a common vision across all commodities for agriculture was another issue that came up. The need to maintain and continue to be positioned as a trusted voice as the Canadian Federation of Agriculture on matters of agriculture was also an issue that was noted. The fact that the CFA has a strong brand image needs to be continued to be leveraged. It is, in many ways, the fundamental value proposition so closely tied to the brand. Many questions and many concerns that emerged at all levels, but came certainly to the forefront in this scan with the board, was on the limited capacity that the Canadian Federation of Agriculture has to tackle many of the many issues that it faces. And of course, there's the other ones that you can expect in terms of key issues, such as climate change, the environment, and so on. This environmental scan was the jumping off point when we met in January of 2023. And there was a substantive réflexion, or reflection that was conducted on that very first day to think through as to what were some of the issues that were shared across the agriculture ecosystem, to use that term, and which ones were more proprietary that the Canadian Federation of Agriculture should focus on. And there is a bit of a criteria that emerged from the conversation, because there are some issues that are central to what the CFA does and some issues where you maybe not as central. And the criteria that emerged in the conversation was, it's got to be top of our list if it's national in scope, if it involves federally regulated agriculture-related activities, and if it spans multiple commodities. Now, the board members that were in the room will remember that point in our discussion as to a bit of an aha moment as to what is closely in scope and closely or slightly outside of scope, or where the CFA plays a lead role versus a support role. And I think that's a very important distinction that we had over the course of our conversations that day. So, regulatory issues, environment and climate change, membership growth, sustainability, communications were all issues that were viewed as being strategic and key in the question that we asked ourselves over the course of the afternoon. Which ones do we play a lead in? Which one do we play a support role in? Which ones do we leave aside because we run the risk of doing what's called mission drift if we pay too much attention to it? On the next slide, you will see the strategy 2023-2027. Now, if somebody at the back of the room can read that slide, I want your optometrist's name. I realize you can't read that, and I do know that you have a bit of a placemat that's from what you see up front. It's in your kits. I'm not going to go through the entire thing line by line, but I just want to hit some of the key highlights and some key points that have emerged from the conversation. First of all, this is strategic. It's directional in its intention. It's not prescriptive in terms of determining how these things get done. The how really gets embedded into the operational plans that Scott and the rest of the team needs to put together to support the strategy. Given that, we had some conversation around the vision, mission, and the guiding principle statements that you see that are on this slide that you see in your document. There was some adjustment, there was some going back and forth, but nothing fundamental changed about the mission, vision, and the guiding principles. And at the end of the day, that is, for me, as a practitioner of strategic planning, that is comforting in that as an organization, your compass remains aimed at the true north in terms of its guiding directional statements of mission, vision, and values. So that's an important consideration here. For those of you that may be comparing this document with the 2017-2022 edition of the strategic plan, you'll note that that line that goes desired outcome across those 4 areas of focus, that's new, and it's kind of a mini vision to state what we are trying to achieve in these 4 very high-level priorities that are listed on this page. We've adjusted some goal statements over the course of our conversations in January, and you will see the 4, some call them verticals, 4 key priorities. And if you're really wondering what this acronym KRA stands for, I think it stands for key result area. No, as a matter of fact, I know it stands for that. Those areas where you need to obtain results. And there's 4 of them. Policy, advocacy, and government relations. That was in the past strategy. It used to be 2 verticals. We now combine them in 1. Just internal logic, and it tells a better story. Essentially, that's what emerged from that conversation. As you read through some of the objectives, some of the important parts is we monitor what's going on, we collaborate with partners and decide which roles we need to play, we need to maintain and continue to be the respected and influential voice. We need to make sure that we are able to speak knowledgeably to these issues, and that's the point that speaks to an informed and qualified personnel, informed and qualified directors. You will see that counterpart come back a little later in a further key result area. We need to continue influencing government policy and maintain strong relationships amongst policymakers. So that's that very first vertical that speaks to policy, advocacy, and government relations. Ongoing communications with members and with partners and with other commodity groups was a very clear focus over the course of our conversations with the board. It was, I would say, something that we discussed at length, and it is something that permeates all of the activities that as an organization the CFA does. Felt that this was so important, the board indicated that we need to keep this. There was some debate whether or not this should be an area of results. But at the end, it was decided to keep it as a focus area because of its importance in maintaining communication, good lines of communications. And as you read through the vertical and some of the objectives, we need the people, we need the channels, we need the right and consistent messaging. We need to be seen as the go-to source for accurate, dependable, reliable, trusted information, and we need to be in a position to support our members in doing that, and that can only be done through solid and timely communications. So that's the second vertical there that I speak to with respect to communications. One of the preoccupations, and I foreshadowed it slightly a moment ago when I talked about some of the key issues that surfaced during the environmental scan, was the old adage, so many issues, so little resources to tackle them. And I think that was a bit of the conversation that's happened around the board table around we can't be everything, we can't be everywhere. We have to pick and choose. We have to be strategic in which issues we choose. But more importantly, we need to also build our own capacity to be ever-present, more ever-present, if I can even use that as a term. So that's that notion of memberships and partnerships. You'll note that item number 1, 3.1, speaks to increasing membership, leveraging the role of partners, providing financial support for those that need it to engage them, particularly board members, and ensuring that our membership fees are fair for all participating organizations. So that was that third vertical on membership. Finally, the last one, the fourth one, modern and effective organization, was one where we had quite a bit of conversation at the board during the board workshop on this. You will note that the 3 previous key result areas, policy, advocacy, and government relations, communications, and membership and partnership, are really focused outwardly to the membership and to the work that the organization, the CFA, needs to do. This fourth one is really more internally focused, and it kind of talks about the organization that is required to enable all of the above to happen, those 3 other verticals or those 3 other pillars. So out of that was a substantive conversation around we need to make sure that we've got our governance is modern and accurate. We need to ensure that we've got good support for our board members, that we've got board capacity and the directors are able to play their fulsome role. We need to make sure that we've got the right staff, qualified, capable to support us, and we need to make sure that we've got the right sponsorship as we go forward. So that was the result from the board strategy and development strategy, that we did in January. I understand from Mary that this has now been adopted by your board of directors. And the next challenge now is for Scott and the rest of the staff to determine how this now weaves itself into operational plans. And of course, it might sound a bit of a paradox. I love to use this line. For board members, a strategy becomes a management tool in how you manage your organization. So with this clear enunciation of a 5-year strategy, the board is certainly setting the direction for staff, certainly setting the direction for itself, certainly setting the direction for its membership, of course doing that in the name of the membership. I would encourage you, if there are any questions, you may want to direct them to your board members. They certainly are able and willing to respond to your questions. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. And Mary, I'm actually putting you 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So thank you, everyone.